Good morning, happy Thursday, happy recruiting show day here on the BWI Live Show, and a special edition because we're going to go right from that intro into this one. Minutes before the show started, we had some breaking news that we're going to go right to Sean Fitz for to start the show. So, Fitz, what's going on with Penn State football and the transfer portal?
Our music budget is pretty low, huh?
Yes, it's the exact same song for everything for the intro.
So Penn State, with their latest transfer pickup, if you've been following along with BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, not a surprise, we reported this one yesterday. But A.J. Harris, the former top 100 cornerback from Georgia, from the University of Georgia, he's originally from Alabama, is enrolled at Penn State. He started classes on Wednesday, and when you start classes, that's pretty much the time to go. He has not officially announced anything. I don't know that he's going to, but he's here. He's in Happy Valley, and he's a Nittany Lion for the spring. So I think a big pickup for Penn State. We did a video last week, T. Frank and I, when we thought this one was going to, be pushed across the line a little bit earlier. But I think he fits the profile of a Big Ten corner. He's a bigger guy, listed at 6'1", 190. He's got a lot of the physical traits that you look for in a conference that is not known for being the fastest conference like the SEC. So I think it's a good pickup for Terry Smith. This is a guy that he really targeted early in the cycle. You look at what they have needed and what they haven't needed. They thought there was a chance they could get Daquan Hardy back. That did not happen. So went out, found one. I'm still working on the other one, but it's really turned around pretty fast for that cornerback room. Of course, you saw in the Peach Bowl, Cam Miller, Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington there. So you now throw throw AJ Harris into the mix, and it's a good start for 2023. It's gonna be one of those positions that we talk about all offseason, about having to level up with the rest of that defense. I think defensive end and corner are going to be those two positions after being the strong positions this year. But big pickup for Penn State in the portal.
Yeah, it was striking. I know we talked about it all offseason, but yesterday I was checking out the Penn State football roster, not necessarily the depth chart, but 6 corners on the roster, I think it was. And I don't know they were all scholarship players either. I think, I don't know if Colin Dinkins is specifically on scholarship, but the number of guys and the snaps that they needed to replace were pretty obvious when you looked at the roster. Ryan, when it comes to the way they've been aggressive in the portal, trying to get one of these corners, I guess, what's your read on the situation and Harris committing to the Nittany Lions?
A massive need. Look how young that room is, right? I mean, Cam Miller was said to be the only upperclassman. I guess he is still technically. AJ, of course, is a sophomore. But, yeah, I mean, they had to get somebody, whether it was now or in the spring. Yeah, they had to add some reinforcements there. I think they feel really good about their young guys, but the young guys still need time. And considering that Emeka Egbuka coming back to Ohio State just popped up on my feed, another reason to add some guys who, AJ doesn't have a ton of experience, but he was a top 50 prospect for a reason, right? So, and very coveted by Penn State coming out of high school as well. So he's a very talented player, fits Penn State really well, and excited to see him, take the field here in the spring and see where he shakes out long term.
Yeah, this is something where we talked about this, and you'll get more of the breakdown. If you want it, by the way, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, we have that video up, I believe, in Fitz's article talking about this stuff. Some of how he fits and some of his skill sets. But just to Ryan's point, the number of snaps here, according to PFF, 89 total snaps last year. So Penn State not getting experience necessarily in A.J. Harris, 9 targets, 5 receptions. All of this in garbage time, by the way, or in mop-up duty. However you want to say that nicely. End of games after the game had been decided by the starters, comes in and had a couple of non-SEC games where he had most of his experience. Fitz, I apologize. Did you get into, and do you want to get into some of like the minutia of why this took a little bit of extra time, or is that not necessarily relevant to the conversation at this point?
I mean, I don't think it's a strictly Harris thing. I think when Penn State starts their semester pretty early compared to a lot of their competitors, and that's just one of those things. It's a built-in disadvantage. Like you can bitch about it all you want, but like it's going to be something that you have to deal with, because it's not only like recruiting the guy, and this is a guy that you had to recruit. You had a prior relationship with him, sort of. Penn State's been at Phoenix City Central. They had TJ Parker, his former high school teammate, committed For a while, they offered him. They were down at the school and things like that. But I mean, this kid was going to Georgia. He's an Alabama kid going to Georgia, so he's either going to Alabama or Georgia, basically. So it was a situation where you have to reignite that, and then on top of that, think about the bureaucratic stuff, the admissions, the housing, everything that you need to turn around. That does not work in short order, especially at Penn State. Like that is a tough thing to do, tough thing to get everybody on the same page. We've talked to James Franklin, we've talked to Andy Frank, we talked to a lot of people about that alignment, and that alignment has gotten better. And a lot of things at Penn State have gotten better. Is never going to be easy. So I think that's the situation that you find yourself in, and part of why Harris was we can label him a late arrival. This is the last weekend that Penn State could possibly add a guy for the spring semester. And then that's the important part of that sentence, for the spring semester. Yeah. The late add is Sunday at midnight. So if you want to get him in class by Monday, it's got to be done by Sunday. So had to get Harris, had to get Nolan Rucci, had to get all those things squared away. And it's, like I said, it's not easy. You can't sit here and complain about it because it's something a lot of people have to deal with. But at the same time, I think the people don't understand that it's not as simple as, hey, he's committed to the school. Okay, he's in the school. Like there's a lot of things that go to it. And if you've been around Penn State, you know that red tape is the third school color. So it's really how things have come along with that side of things. So it's burned them before, it didn't burn them this time. So I think that's a good thing.
We'll get back to some of this conversation maybe a little bit later. And of course, we're going to talk about the breaking news that affected all of college football yesterday. But the first thing we have to talk to you about is, as we mentioned, it's January. And Nate Bauer put it the best way I could possibly think of on Tuesday when he said, this part of the season, it's a grind in the darkness for football players to get better at their craft. If you want to really maximize that time, MMAFx is the way to do it. Professional course taught on film by Bruce Lombard of Lombard MMA with former Penn State All-Big Ten defensive tackle Anthony Zettel. It's professional videography with different technical angles for hand fighting, slow motion visual details, and attention to detail in technical commenting so that you can help your team become better in the trenches. For defensive linemen, linebackers is great for your front seven. Also for receivers trying to get off of press. If you need to defeat a block, if you need to defeat hand fighting, MMAFx is the program for you, the only comprehensive hand fighting program video set for football players available. So this is MMA and mixed martial arts, hand fighting, some of the combat sports, all of those skills tailored specifically to football. And I probably haven't emphasized that enough. So this is how to use your hands like a professional on the football field. I've been talking about, like, a lot of people think the best thing to do is to get in the weight room and get massive. And yes, being strong is a core foundation of football, but you watch a bunch of big, strong guys run around the field not knowing what to do. This is an edge you can have as a football player. So if you want to check this out, you can use this promo code 15BWI to get 15% off at lombardmma.com/shop. That's lombardmma.com/shop. And you get 15% off the video program to help your team take it to the next level. They also have a boxing course for offensive linemen. I got to see that one in person. It's pretty cool. And again, all of these things are tailored to specifically football. So check that out, Bruce at MMAFx.net. Now, there's a lot of moving parts today. The last part of the show is going to be the mailbag. The mailbag is back. So we got a lot of great submissions, but we want to hear from you in the chat. If you drop your question in, we'll get to that, the best ones at the end of the show. So that's the first caveat I have on the rundown today. But the big news yesterday, guys, Nick Saban retiring from Alabama. I always have a problem of whenever there's like genuine breaking news, I'm like, that's not real. I don't want to get I'm trying to find a different way to say it other than butt crack sports, which is what they say on the Dan Le Batard show. But basically, like, you don't want to get fooled. It's real. Nick Saban retiring from Alabama. So Ryan, just your general thoughts on Nick Saban leaving college football and its impact on the landscape.
Yeah, best coach of all time. I think it's pretty clear. I'm sure some Penn State fans are going to be mad at me for saying that with Paterno, but what was it, 17 seasons, 6 national championships, I believe it was. I mean, I don't know how you can really argue that. Actually, a modern era. I just think what football is now, what football was 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever, however you want to look at it. It's incredible the consistency they've had there. Yeah, the timing of his announcement was very interesting, just because of all the other moves that have taken place so far. Who replaces him? There's so many different ways to look at that, but it's obviously the job of college football right now. I think at the same time, with some of the major moves we're seeing, with so like Texas joining the SEC, is Steve Sarkisian. Is that attractive to a Sarkisian? Is it attractive to a Dan Lanning? Is it attractive to, I would argue, Kalen DeBoer? It would be the most out of those three, like Kirby Smart, some of those guys. I don't see them leaving. So I'm just very curious to see how Alabama hires or who they approach. They're going to get somebody great, but I think those 3, 4, 5 top guys that everybody's talking about, is it worth leaving what you've built so far to take over that program and obviously take over after arguably the greatest coach of all time? So I'll be very curious to see who they hire, because I don't think it's as easy of a hire as it would have been maybe if he announced this earlier in the season, kind of a going away tour kind of situation.
Right.
With the way it played out, 12-team playoff, all that good stuff. Very intriguing, and the dominoes that come after that too. Even what if Harbaugh leaves Michigan too? I mean, talk about two massive upcoming opening. Should be fun to watch here in the coming weeks.
That's a great point. It's not done, despite the fact that we've gotten through what you would expect to be the genuine, like the firings are over, but some of the other moves in college football, the calendar never sleeps. Fitz, how do you feel about that in terms of your general thoughts on Nick Saban, and then what Ryan is talking about, maybe NIL, the transfer portal, some of these things leveling the landscape a little bit, where you maybe have built up something institutionally that's an advantage? Do you see that, and do you see Alabama still as the top job in college football?
I think so, but the problem there is, to be the guy that comes after the guy is really hard. Like, there's nobody that's going to come in, match those expectations, and go with it. I just strongly feel that way about pretty much any sort of living legend that you would have coaching there. It's just not going to work, and it's going to work different than it will work with Saban. Like, you're going to run into the things that he has been able to, I talked about alignment a few minutes ago here. The things that he's been able to do at Alabama are because that's the way that he's gotten them done. That's the way that he's been allowed to get them done. So you bring in an outsider. It doesn't seem like there's a guy on the staff that's going to take over. You bring in an outsider to do it. And yes, those Alabama folks and the money behind it and everything are going to want to win, but it's going to be a different way to win than you won with Nick Saban. I don't know that a new guy can come in and say, cut this check, I need this built in the next year. Like that is going to be something
it leads with him.
Yeah. I mean, it's like with Coach K at Duke, you can still be a great program, but are you going to be what we've come to compare everyone to Bama? Like, I don't know that that's going to be the case. So I think because of that, the job is going to be attractive to everybody. Like but at the same time, you have to think about it. It's not a no-brainer. So it's going to be a situation where it's going to be a tough task for the next guy. Not that he can't do it, but like you're always going to be compared to that guy. I mean, we know what it's like around here. You're always going to be compared to that guy because he was what he was, and it's going to be tough. So it seems like they're going to turn it around pretty quickly, which I think is the way to go. I'm sure that Nick has kept them in the loop on everything, and he's 72 years old. Like, you're going to prepare for this at some point. I think that's going to be a very interesting couple of days there, as Ryan mentioned. Of course, Michigan is sort of on the clock as well here. How does that trickle down effect go? Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell, Kalen DeBoer, like the guys that have had success in this last year are going to be attractive. And then you've got the longer term names. James Franklin's name's been thrown out there as well. Like, it's I don't know if there's a right answer, but like, I think it's a big answer. But on the flip side of that, like, it's gotten harder. Transfer portal, NIL, the schedule, just the general schedule. Like, you want to play golf? Don't be a college football coach. Like, that's kind of where you're at with things like that right now. So that's why you see a lot of these guys flocking to the pros, whether it's head coaches, whether it's assistant coaches and things like that. So the grind, the wear, some hero man who's done it at the highest level for the longest time, maybe it's just not worth the squeeze anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase that and kind of couch that conversation, because you could see, and the things he was talking about over the last couple of years is, kind of all those things you just laid out are the problems that are arising from NIL, transfer portal, etc. So let's just shift. I'm going to
hold on real quick. Who do you think it's going to be, Sean? If you just had to pick a name. Yeah.
I've,
Of course, we don't know.
Of course we don't. DeBoer's been the guy that I've heard named most. Of course, the landing thing last night, I don't know how that ended up. I went to bed when it was he was in Tuscaloosa. Was he not in Tuscaloosa? I don't know.
$20 million buyout there.
Hey, when's the last time Alabama had to pay a buyout? You know?
But well, that too. But also, like I listened to Staples and some other podcasts. They said there's even more than 20 million. There's some other stuff in there too that would actually be over that. But
my question with those two guys is the Pacific Northwest to Tuscaloosa, Alabama is a bit of a change. So, and then you go back to Dabo, who everybody always thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But like
anyone but Dabo,
like the way that he has approached NIL, the portal, and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that that's the right way to go either.
Yeah, it's upset the apple cart in a lot of different ways over the last couple of years, and kind of shifted some of the power and the percentages, in the margins. One of the, and you mentioned this, Fitz, and this is where I was going to go next, is just the general conversation around James Franklin being a part of the conversation. It's not something we can ignore, but I don't know necessarily what to put stock in this part of the conversation, because as you guys mentioned, the chat is talking about everyone from Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, all these other names coming up before James Franklin. Penn State fans react very differently to James Franklin being in the conversation than I think other schools might. So what do you put into this, Ryan, as far as James Franklin being a part of the conversation?
Is he a part of the conversation? I mean, I've seen Thamel talk about it. I haven't seen too many others.
I guess that's the thing, is like his name was among the very first mentioned by Pete Thamel. So like being a part of that conversation, but also being a name isn't necessarily emphasized. Like I know this is kind of the eye-rolly part of the offseason for Penn State fans of here we go again, our opening opportunity. But like this is a real opportunity for any head coach in America. So I guess where do you put all of this stuff?
Lower buyout, $6 million buyout. That's much easier for Alabama, right? But it's just hard for me to see that happening. I think a lot of other jobs made sense that he's been linked to over this one. Personally, I just don't know. I mean, obviously he had great success at Vanderbilt. That was also over a decade ago, right? It's not like Penn State's recruited down there, but it's not like they're consistently plucking all these top guys that, would show that he has or his staff has, great ties in that area. They get good players for sure, but it's not on the consistent level that Alabama's had. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons for his agent, which is the same agent as everybody else, Jimmy Sexton, of course, to promote, and who knows what will happen. But to me, it would be very surprising.
Fitz, what do you think?
First thing, I don't think he'll be the guy, but everything I said about Dabo, James is kind of the opposite. Like, transfer portal, NIL, facilities, all that kind of stuff. Freaking, he'd love that. He would love that checkbook that comes with it. Jimmy Sexton's his agent. I mean, you're going to see a lot of Sexton clients. That you're going to learn a lot of people are Sexton clients in the next couple of days, because you're going to see their name out there. I think he'd be interested. I think he'd be dumb not to be interested. And I think it's going to be a situation where if you're going to try and follow Nick Saban, you're going to try and follow that model where he's the CEO and bring in coordinators to get the thing. And I think that's when Franklin's would be at his best, when he would let his coordinators do their thing and be the CEO, the recruiter, and everything like that. I think he would have some level of success there. Nobody's going to match Saban, but
right.
Just writing this off as this guy can't get it done at Penn State, he can't get it done everywhere. Then I don't think that there's a way to get around that. So I think he would be interested. I think that it's probably not. I mean, it's not going to happen, but I think it's definitely something that the eyes would light up if you gave him that runway there.
Yeah. And for those on the podcast, I've just been flashing comments from the chat that are all, please, Alabama, take James Franklin. Please, Alabama, take James Franklin. So, like, this is what I'm talking about, of the conversation around James Franklin is half of the fan base, and this is the problem, and this is what I'm already breaking my New Year's resolution of, like, I'm not going to react to the overly and obviously negative stuff on the internet, and here we go, like, doing that here on the show. But generally, like, this is a part of the conversation about the Penn State fan base is the internet did the thing last night where a major news item happens and then everyone makes it about themselves on Twitter. So it's just like, James Franklin haters are out there on the internet trolling all of this information. And like the conversation and discourse goes off the rails about James Franklin and his time at Penn State. So it just, more than anything, is just picking the same scab with this conversation.
And my thing was, and just earlier too, like, how far do they have to go down this list? And I don't, who knows where Franklin is at, but like, to me, it's very obvious who the top guys would be. We mentioned them all. It's just, if they don't budge, which there's a lot of reasons for them not to budge, who would it be then? I mean, and would it be a tier 2 kind of guy, or do they just circle back and say, here's $15 million, and suck it up kind of situation? So
yeah,
to me, it's just a fascinating hire, and the trickle down effect is going to be incredible to watch, because they certainly are going to want a tier 1, top 5 coach. I don't know that as realistic as it is when you look at who those coaches are. That's why DeBoer makes the most sense, because Washington just doesn't have what Oregon has, what Texas has. I mean, we haven't mentioned Lane Kiffin. I can't really see that happening because of the way Saban and Kiffin kind of butted heads towards the end. But I mean, he's certainly doing well at Ole Miss, so
yeah,
fun to watch.
So the recruiting angle is the next part, and I think I'll just get right to it. The number one player for people that follow Penn State recruiting with Alabama tie, Rico Scott, over in Ryan's neck of the woods. I'm not asking, is there any reporting, but like when you come to these conversations about coach movement and then players maybe being dislodged from different schools, Ryan, I guess what's your general thought of, is the phone burning for Rico Scott right now from the Penn State coaching staff? And, what are the other dominoes from other programs? Could you see them being willing to take on other players from programs if they do get dislodged in this coach movement here late?
I would think that they're going to reach out. He is a summer enrollee, so he can get out of his letter of intent. But I don't. Do I think it's likely? No, but I wouldn't be shocked if they kick the tires. I see Sean rolling his eyes. Go ahead, Fitz.
No. I mean, he's signed. He's going to Alabama. He's wanted to go to Alabama. He hopped on that scholarship, and he wants to be at Alabama. Like, and I know Nick Saban changes things, but you got to trust the next guy. Like, the next guy's going to be good. It's not like this guy's going to turn around and all of a sudden long for Central Pennsylvania. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with that. So I think things change maybe in a year or two. I think the thing to look at now is that 30-day window. Alabama had a bunch of guys go in the portal, which is kind of the way that they churn down there, and it works for them. But does that open up any other potential guys? They haven't been terribly active up north. Like, there's been offers and things like that, but there hasn't been a ton of guys that have gone down there. Some of the guys that have landed there have gone, Jihad Campbell's from Jersey, went down to IMG. So he's basically a Northeast kid now anyway. So, a lot of their roster is Alabama and out. And I think that probably throws a wrench into things if you're looking at Penn State, how they'll, if anything would trickle this way. I have a hard time seeing that happen.
How are and of course, a lot of this stuff you can find out over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Great time to remind you to sign up for bluewhiteillustrated.com, our special YouTube and podcast offer 2 months for $1. Use code PSU1, and you'll get the special offer, that deal for 2 months for $1. And if you thought January or February or any time in the calendar was going to be like a slow news cycle, check out what we're talking about today, and I'll give you an idea about what's going to be happening in the future. So great time to sign up, get all that inside information. But just generally, Penn State and their outlook over the next couple of weeks and months, obvious needs still, or I guess maybe not obvious needs. They've covered a lot of what they need in the transfer portal with AJ Harris committing today. Are they in position to take on guys in the traditional signing period from a high school perspective, or is the emphasis back still on the portal and getting ready for 2024 and addressing any of those depth needs they may want, Ryan?
Well, they're going to host at least one official visit. We know that in January, so we'll see where things go there. But I still would believe that they would, if they have a couple of scholarships laying around. I mean, they certainly would rather use it in the portal in the spring. But at the same time, there's going to be more outgoings. I mean, I'm shocked that they've only had 3 scholarship guys, I believe, Sean, that left, right, in this past portal. So I guess, I mean, if somebody emerges, but I don't see a whole lot of guys emerging right now, but talk to me in a week or so. Maybe things will be different.
You have any thoughts on this?
No, I agree with Ryan. You think about the things that we talked about in December around National Signing Day. That class has built out numbers-wise that they don't have needs from a numbers perspective. Obviously, you have to find another receiver right there. It's not floating around right now. So the way that you fix what you're trying to do in the next year is through the portal. So that's where you keep plugging along there. Typically we hear about a guy by now in the 2024 class. It's a legitimate option, maybe like Venga, like Chimdi last year, and nothing really serious has popped up. There's been names, but there's nothing really serious there.
So check out all that information reporting on bluewhiteillustrated.com. Before we get to the mailbag, one thing, if you've got questions here in the chat, I saw one particular question for the mailbag. If you've got anything, submit it. We're going to be getting to that here shortly. But before we do that, talk about your future, talking about the future of all these prospects, commits, players, etc. But what about your future? Are you a corporate executive that has the skills that you built up over a lifetime that you want to put work for you and not somebody else? Check My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant with extensive experience placing people like you with the perfect franchise to manage. If it's a side hustle you're looking for, maybe you don't want to leave your full-time job, maybe you want to diversify, build wealth, have a secondary stream of income, or maybe this is your legacy play, something that you can give to the next generation of your family. Things are booming, downturn, upturn. The economy is a diverse and weird thing that I don't understand, but Andy does, and that's the most important thing. If you want to go and talk to him about what there is out there, last time, we're going to be actually getting an update pretty soon. I'm going to be learning more about this stuff, but he was talking about brick and mortar industries. He's talking about, different businesses you can buy into, whether it's in the food industry, maybe it's in men's health, which is really big right now. All those things you learn from him during the consultation process so he can put you into the right business so you can be successful in your particular neck of the woods, wherever you live, what your local area needs, and what you know how to do. So consider franchise ownership on a hands-off or day-to-day management level. Doesn't matter. His services are 100% free. He's here to help if you have any questions. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, as you can see here on the show, 404-973-9901, or you can check him out on the Blue White Illustrated message board, which is a great place to go for a lot of things, including, guys, something that I'm excited that we get back, the BWI Mailbag. As always, the best way to get your questions is go to the Blue White Illustrated message board, premium content, subscribe, all that stuff we talked about earlier, and then submit your question on the message board thread. That's where the bulk of our questions are going to come from, including this one. Will Penn State try for a more West Coast recruits with the expansion of the Big Ten, or are the logistical and economic constraints of recruiting that far out too much? Ryan, I think we've talked about this a couple of times, but now that it's here, now that the schedule is set and Penn State is going to be going out west, is there any hope of more national recruiting because of the schedule?
I don't think so. Yeah, sure, they're going to play a game or two out there each year, but I don't think that makes a kid from Los Angeles want to go play across the country. They've always recruited out there, but just because they're playing USC or UCLA or we'll even throw Oregon and Washington into that, doesn't instantly make a top 300 kind of kid want to move across the country. I mean, a lot of the same things that impact them now. We'll say everything from NIL opportunities to proximity to home to relationships. I mean, even obviously Penn State recruits very hard and that they stay on guys, but when you're all the way across the country, it does impact the relationship compared to, how easy you can get to some other schools that are closer. And that's why visits are so important. Yes, talking on the phone and text messaging all the time, that is an important part of building relationships, but actually getting, one-on-one and, having lunch with a coach, that kind of stuff goes a long way as well. So I don't see it impacting them a whole lot. I don't see a lot of doors opening just because they're going to start playing some more West Coast schools. They're going to certainly keep trying to recruit out there, and they'll land guys maybe occasionally. But there's a reason that is Farmer still the last guy they got from California? Am I missing anyone? I mean, obviously they tried Leia, but There's a reason it's been a while that West Coast guys, obviously Vega and Court, there are some West Coast guys, but
Yeah.
saying California most notably.
Yeah, I don't think you count T.A. Cunningham on that list of guys from California, Fitz.
No. Count part of them. I think an interesting thing here, Penn State's always tried. Like, just because the results aren't there doesn't mean they haven't tried. It's an incredibly tough sell to get you across the country, get your parents across the country for games. I don't think the added exposure does a ton for Penn State here. The interesting wrinkle here is that in the spring evaluation period, in the upcoming evaluation period, coaches are able to now talk to 2025 guys in person. So it's going to give Terry Smith a chance to go to California, meet a corner in person, and maybe make a bigger impact than he would just saying hello over the phone. So I think that is something that could help. I don't think it changes anything. I agree with Ryan that, you're never going to consistently pull kids across the country. But I think it can help put the name with the face, get a little bit of a stronger relationship going. So I think that's probably a positive for Penn State moving forward, but I don't think it changes all that much in the sense of the question.
So on the flip side, and this is my question here, I think there's a fear from Penn State fans that the reverse is true. A guy like Elijah Newby committing to USC, and I apologize, David Poly was the other guy that committed to USC in this last recruiting cycle, and people wanted to equate USC joining the Big Ten. So is the flip true? Like, is USC playing out on the East Coast, getting a bit more exposure, already having sort of a national recruiting platform? Does that give them an advantage, or is it just like you said, Fitz, where Alabama starts with Alabama and they get select recruits on the perimeter of that on a national scale, but the bulk of everyone's class is regional no matter where you are? How do you see that?
Yeah, the appeal is the same appeal as it was before. Like for Newby, for Poly, who eventually signed with Michigan, by the way. The appeal is still the appeal for Oregon. It's not playing a Big Ten schedule. It's Nike uniforms, offense, whatever. The appeal for Washington, obviously, the playoff run, the success that they've had under Kalen DeBoer, and the appeal for UCLA, or it's not maybe not UCLA, USC, as being in Los Angeles, being part of that whole scene, like that whole. I think that's a big thing that drew Elijah Newby out there. So the appeal it really hasn't changed even though the schedule has changed there.
Gotcha. Next question here in the mailbag. Blue and White 86. Given the new offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, how does that impact recruiting in general? Do they open up any new territories? Kind of the same question, but focusing on the tangible things that have happened to Penn State with Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen. How do they mesh with this year's class since they had no input into recruiting? Let's focus 2025 maybe on that second part if you want to answer. But Ryan, we've talked a little bit about this, of how offense coordinator, defense coordinator, they're a little de-emphasized in the actual day-to-day recruiting as much as the position coaches. But I guess, what's your take on this question?
Well, as far as opening up new recruiting territories, I don't know. I mean, I guess Tom Allen has some ties in Indiana, but I don't. What has Kotelnicki done from a recruiting? Well, I guess that's actually, never mind. We might have that question a little bit later, but. Look, as far as meshing with the guys, it is kind of what it is. I mean, the guys who have already committed knew very well that there's a good chance that their coordinators will change at some point in their years. They're going to have to just open up the door and kind of do their best to get used to the new staff. I mean, I think from what we've gathered so far, Kotelnicki's done a great job with that offensively. I haven't gotten a ton of feedback defensively with Tom Allen, just because of also the timing of the hire and everything else that's been going on. That hasn't been something I just did a whole lot on. I think Kotelnicki's done a pretty good job from everything I've gathered so far. But again, we had a longer runway to kind of gather that information. But as far as new recruiting territories, I mean, that's something that we will dig on too, as far as like trying to figure out, is there an area or two that those guys will kind of oversee? But usually coordinators don't really have those responsibilities all that much. I'm trying to think of the last coordinator. Like Yurcich didn't really have I guess he kind of did Cleveland a little bit.
Spots in Pennsylvania. Yurcich had some of Ohio, but it's really just dependent on your background there, and it's not extensive. He's not going to do school hopping where he goes from this school to their rival to the next school that's down the highway and things like that. It's more of a positional aspect with, or at least what it was with Yurcich. And I think with Tom Allen, he's got connections down in Florida. He's got connections down south. And, you look at some of the guys that Indiana's had over the years, and Michael Penix is from Tampa. Like you look at some of the guys that they've had, they've worked some of those connections. I don't know that it's all that different than Manny's footprint, really. So I don't think it changes all that much for Penn State.
Tailing right off that question very well. This is about Andy Kotelnicki. PSU Rem had a long question about Andy Kotelnicki that I think is more for the football show, talking about specifically some of the things he can do on offense. But he did have this question that wrapped up, kind of summarized everything. What kind of recruiter is he, and will he zero in exclusively on quarterback recruiting like Yurcich, or will he be more broadly involved? So, kind of what you guys just explained, but generally, what do you know about Andy Kotelnicki as a recruiter? And I think the quarterback part is a very interesting part, because say what you want about Mike Yurcich, he identified bona fide quarterback prospects pretty early in the process. Look at some of the guys that he identified throughout his tenure. So Fitz, how do you think Andy Kotelnicki folds into all of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a different approach, because you're going to have to lean on Danny O'Brien for your quarterback evaluations now for the most part. And you show that tape to everybody. Franklin gets involved. Kotelnicki's going to be involved, but O'Brien's going to be the guy that I think makes those calls. Kotelnicki's not a quarterback guy. Like I don't want to say it's the opposite of Mike Yurcich, but it's going to have a different effect in how they recruit quarterbacks. And, I think they'll be fine with O'Brien, but it's going to be a different approach. So that's the way that I would go with that. He's going to be a guy that you bring in. He's kind of going to be like a Bob Shoop, I think. A guy that you bring in, you show him the tape, you show him how much fun you can have in this offense, how effective you can be in this offense. And it's the offense that's making the pitch. It's not the quarterback. It's not just one position and things like that. So I think that's the approach that I think they'll take. He's a fun personality guy. The people that have been around him seem to like him a lot. He's got some street cred in terms of putting up points. You put up points at Kansas, you're going to have some people that look at that and say, "Wow, that's pretty impressive." So it's like Shrewsbury last year with Penn State basketball. Like, hey, you're going to win in the tournament with Penn State. You must be a really good coach. So I think it's a situation. Hi, Nate, by the way. I think it's going to be a situation that he kind of sells the entire product more so than selling a quarterback, while O'Brien can work on the quarterbacks.
T-Fact, real quick. One thing I'll add too is like Jalen Daniels. Is it Jalen Daniels? Yeah, Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean, the two quarterbacks that have primarily run the show in Kansas. Neither of them were recruited by Leipold and Kotelnicki. They were both 2020, I believe 2020 prospects before they got there in 2021. So just as far as like trying to point to, well, those guys were great evaluations, right? They've kind of exceeded things. We really just haven't seen much of the quarterbacks that they actually have recruited to Kansas. So it's just kind of hard to pinpoint evaluation wise.
Yeah, and generally, this is something I was thinking about when Fitz was talking about how Kotelnicki kind of folds into that quarterback conversation. I'm obviously very specifically looking for the NFL model of you need to have a franchise quarterback. That's generally how I view football. Michigan winning, and maybe that you don't need to always have the elite quarterback. There are different ways to win in college that is not so narrow of a focus like it is in the NFL. But does this concern either of you that, the quarterback track record isn't really there for Andy Kotelnicki, developing a guy going to the NFL, having that kind of feather in your cap, given that, Mike Yurcich, there was some talk about Mason Rudolph and working at Ohio State with those quarterbacks, and there was at least some things you could point to say, hey, this guy has been a part of quarterback development that's gone on to the NFL. Does that concern either of you that isn't really part of the conversation here with Penn State's new offense coordinator? Ryan, just start with you and give your thoughts, please.
I mean, that's like Aller is a NFL quarterback, right? So develop-wise, if they can develop him into that, I mean, there's credibility there. But at the same time, I mean, I think Penn State's just looking for how's the best to put it? Just a college offense that works. That really hits the ground running and is exciting and is fun if they can take what they did at Kansas and bring it here and actually hits the ground and is successful like it was there, I think they'll be just fine. That's just what I'm looking for more than you got to develop quarterbacks, got to get them to the NFL. It is important, and it's a topic we've talked about a lot with Aller, and I think that's why Aller is so kind of important moving forward, because he does represent that as an opportunity for Penn State to point to a guy and say, this is a bona fide NFL quarterback. But at the same time, I just, after looking at this year and what Kansas has done, I think it's like that's step 3 or 4. Right now, it's step 1 or 2. Let's just get this college offense exciting, working, and giving a reason to get people excited.
I'm obviously starting with the end in mind with that particular idea. Lambda, though, is making my point. Didn't he develop Tyree Jackson?
Did he? Yes. Yeah,
but
to some degree. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the hat
also, Tyree Jackson is the top name we go to when we're talking about Andy Nittany.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot he was at Buffalo. That's a good point. That's a good point, Lambda.
Fitz, you want to weigh in, or you seem
you're
like
both making different points. Ryan says that's a good point. You're sarcastically saying that's a good point. Like, it's fun to watch from this.
I mean,
I'm gonna stay out of it.
I was gonna let it slide.
Isn't he a tight end now? Anyway,
that's exactly my point. That's exactly
he was
my point.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
I enjoyed.
He was a good player back in the day. That's right. He's a tight end now. Sorry.
Let's move on to the next question then, and I got to find it here. I apologize. I was hyper-ventilating about that particular question. This one, I think, is a really great question. A few weeks ago, both of you wrote articles regarding Syracuse and the impact of their new coaches that might have on recruiting. Syracuse becoming a threat in the region. From what you've seen, heard since then, has your opinion changed? Is that enough? This is my question. Is that enough time for either of your opinions to change? And more importantly, how will it affect Penn State? Fitz, what have you seen from this particular conversation since you wrote that article?
Putting together a good recruiting staff. We're going to see how that plays out. I mean, with Syracuse, it's how it plays out in a couple different ways. Number one, you can try and get these kids to campus, but you're going to have to get them into campus in January and the first week of February in Syracuse, New York. I've done it. I don't suggest it, but that's up to those guys. They're really good recruiters. Then number two, can these guys coach? We're not going to know that till the fall. So a lot of wait and see there. My thoughts haven't changed. I think it's a fantastic relationship recruiting staff, but it's a tough sell. And we're going to see that. And we've seen that in the portal so far. The issue with the question is that we wrote that, and then it's been a dead period ever since. So you can't really gauge how that's going to be. But there's more excitement for Syracuse than there's been in a long time. Dino, for being a really good football coach, just didn't have that buzz. And it's an incredibly hard sell. Syracuse is not what it was once upon a time. And that's, we talk about these different spaces getting, even more, the distance growing, even though the city stays the same, the campus stays the same, the distance between them and civilization, essentially. We see this with Penn State too. The difference between them and civilization is still a long way, and it's really cold. So it's going to be a tough sell. Elijah's really good at it. They're bringing in Ross Douglas. He's going to be really good at it. Fran Brown's really good at it. They're going to go at the throat, like they're going to go as hard as they can. But at the same time, it's going to be a tough sell. It's not going to be for everybody. I think they're going to have some level of success. Does that cut into Penn State's success? Probably limited, but I wouldn't be shocked to see, guys that Penn State has committed right now in 2025. Would not be shocked to see them pop up on campus up there. So they're going to work hard. They're going to go at it. I don't know that it's going to be a threat, but it's going to be a storyline that we're forced to follow.
Right. Ryan, any thoughts on?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on that one. So here's one thing I'll say. We're going to get into junior days next week. Penn State will host its first junior day on January 20th, but this is something I've been working on a good bit over the last week or two. We got a little over 20 guys confirmed right now. We'll put them out here in the coming days. Already out of those, it's a little over 20 guys. 6 of them have confirmed they have Syracuse junior day visits set. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if it ends up, a bunch of these guys haven't locked in other dates yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's closer to half or even a little bit more who do end up going up to Syracuse. And we're talking about, I'm not going to go through all the names right now, but these are most of the top players in the region. So Syracuse is a popular name right now when it comes to junior days. I think they will be a popular place to visit more so in the spring maybe than in junior days, especially. But the whole thing with Syracuse, in my eyes, is I think there'll be a player for 2025. Are they going to get a lot of these guys that Penn State's really pushing hard for? I still expect Penn State to get a bunch of those guys. And of course, Michigan's, Ohio State's, Notre Dame's, maybe some Southern schools will pluck some guys as well. The real answer to how successful they will be, I think, will be once they actually coach some games, they get a season or two under their belt. And if they can get success there, get Syracuse to bowl games, get to 8 wins, really gain momentum, then I think you're talking about something a little different. They will be a player of 2025, new coach bump, excitement, Fran Brown and all them. They have great ties to the area. I think long term, the success they have as actual game managers and producing wins, that'll determine whether Syracuse really becomes a thorn in Penn State's side.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted here by Lambda, and I just want to make my point clear earlier. He says Jackson threw for 3,100 yards at Buffalo. Aller throwing for 2,600 yards in an extra game. My point is not offensive production, and I think that's what Ryan was talking about. That's what they're talking about, is getting the offense to work. My point is NFL quarterbacks want to go to places that develop NFL quarterbacks. In Penn State, Buffalo, Tyree Jackson, that does not make that equation at all a part of what the reputation of Eddie Kotelnicki is. I agree. Getting yardage and points and all those things out of players is great. And I'm not trying to take any of that away. I'm just saying the perception and all those things. It didn't help with Mike Yurcich. So I understand that, but I guess that's just generally what I was trying to say. The next question here is going back to an old but good. Beaver Hill says, how good of a litmus test is the in-state 2025 cycle for Penn State being able to continue to dominate the state? Fitz, Penn State, are they in a good position where some of the guys in the upcoming class, just from a broad view of what you've seen and what you've heard?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you're going to get Zahir Mathis. Well, sorry, Zahir Mathis committed to Ohio State this week.
There's a reason this question, I think, came to right now, Sean. Go ahead.
Right. Yes. Sorry. I didn't have the rankings up in front of me. That's why I'm trying to filibuster here before I get there. So thank you for that. No, I think it'll be good. I have a tough time putting stock into much 2025 right now, just because it's so early. Junior tape just came out, and we're still sort of getting our footing in terms of where the guys are going to go. I mean, you look at where Penn State stands in this class. Alex Tash is a good example of a guy that's probably going to just continue to rise. Cam Smith's out there. Matt Zollers is a guy that's been, on Penn State's radar for a long time, even though they have a quarterback in this class. That's interesting. Lex Cyrus went down to San Antonio, had a good showing there, and he's got the verified numbers that those the schools love in terms of being a sprinter. So yeah, I think they'll be okay. You got some battles to fight. Michael Carroll, is a legacy prospect, but Michigan's high there. The guys at St. Joseph Prep, Maxwell Roy and Anthony Sacca in general, are you going to be in it till the end with those guys? And can you get that over the line? So I think that those are the guys that really move the needle for me so far, but you're going to find some guys that move up. You're going to find some guys that move down. I think Tyke Hayes had a really good year. I think he can continue to move up. The running back from Aliquippa that's committed to Penn State. And yeah, we're going to see where some of these other things land, but extremely, I think I said this in December, cannot stress enough how extremely early you look at some of the guys that ended up in Penn State's class and last year. And Luke Reynolds I don't think had an offer at this point. Malachi Williams, I didn't even know who it was at this point last year. He popped up for a junior day visit, and we didn't think anything of it. So there's going to be a lot of guys that continue to pop up. These early rankings are fine for what they're worth, but you got to take them for what they're worth. So that's kind of where I'm at with 2025. Penn State has positioned themselves well with Terry in Western Pennsylvania, with Dion in Eastern Pennsylvania. You're going to look at Zahir Mathis and say he's not coming here, but we looked at you a couple months ago and said he's not coming here too. I don't think things have changed there.
So, Ryan, I guess that is kind of the conversation here, and Fitz has laid out the number and the volume of high-quality players in Pennsylvania that Penn State has recruited. And if you look at other regional schools, Penn State does get the majority of the players from their own state to come to this institution, but guys like Zahir Mathis, other of those top-of-the-top national recruits do not come to Penn State on a regular basis. So
yeah, they've landed quite a few top 100 prospects in PA, though. I mean, the Philly area, they've missed out on some guys.
I'm talking about the perception of those 5-star guys or those guys that become Alabama recruits, kind of those particular.
Penn State doesn't do well with guys that are really big time early. And a lot of these guys come from schools where Imhotep and I White was the same way a couple years ago. When they get big time early, Penn State doesn't have a ton of success there. I think Fleming might be an example of that as well. But when these big schools start calling and you start hearing that you're bigger than Penn State, you start to believe it. And I think that's what they've had to come up against in past cycles.
And I think that's the perception that kind of ignited the question, Ryan. I guess is where I was trying to get in. Not trying to say that Penn State doesn't get a Nick Singleton or doesn't get Quentin Martin, but they don't land all of them. Of the dominate the state means every single recruit you want, you get from your state. So I guess, is that it? What's the fair barometer of that?
Yeah, I mean, the guys they don't usually land are the top Philly guys. I mean, that's usually just kind of it. I mean, outside of that, they've pretty much have done what they need to do. I mean, just circling back to
the work they've done in Western Pennsylvania is just
great.
It's unbelievable. And now the talent is not what it used to be. And, those guys are more few and far between. And there's a lot of guys that they offer early that end up falling off that really aren't targets by the time that they end up picking a school. But they've done a great job. Terry and some other guys have done a great job just like planting the flag there and going with it. And Quentin Martin was one of the national. There's not a ton of national recruits coming out of there anymore. More so on the eastern side of the state than the western side. Now, I think that the western guys have maybe panned out a little bit better. But that's a discussion for another day. Right. But that's kind of where Penn State has sort of planted its flag and gone with it. And it coincides with Pitt. I don't want to say de-emphasizing the area, but like not pulling that extra kid. And we talk about Mike Loxley doing it with Maryland. We used to talk about it with Paris Ford and DeMar Hamlin and guys like that in Pittsburgh, and it's just not happening anymore. So Penn State's done a really nice job of adjusting and going from there.
I think that's a really good point to bring up. That balance of the guys that are national headline news, like you said, and then how well they've been doing everywhere else. I want to get to a couple more of these questions here. This one from Losie's Mustache, with LeJontay Wester committing to Colorado, is Penn State likely waiting until after spring ball to see if they're in the mix with another transfer receiver? Penn State, we talked about this on the show, would love to get two. Obviously, getting Julian Fleming takes care of part of that. Do you guys have a read on, what he's asking here about the timing of getting a second receiver in the class? Ryan, what do you think?
Is there another receiver emerging, Sean? I don't see one. You've been following the portal better than me.
His mustache definitely red. So check those out. But yeah, I mean, you look at what's out there. Julian Fleming's out there, and Wester was the top guy. He's going to Colorado. So,
yeah. All right. This one, again, kind of on the same topic. We are 8286 asks, is it crazy to be concerned about whiteout recruiting? This year didn't go. He's talking about the footprint didn't go too far to land commits that they landed. Seems like recruiting for this position is very limited. He goes on to ask about, like, you can't go west because Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. You can't go down south. It seems like, and he's pointing to some specific things of these are all regional recruits. I think specifically this last class, guys, do you have a concern about the regional footprint with Virginia not producing maybe the same way they expected? Although it is super early on in Marcus Hagen's time at Penn State, I think that's that's an important thing to remember. Fitz, how do you view their footprint for wide receiver recruiting?
I mean, it's a concern in that they've not brought in the guy. I mean, it's more about the room than it is about the footprint, the recruiting, and all that stuff right now. So like that's where your concern should lie. The concern that I've seen from people on our little corner of the internet is a bit much in terms of like judging the entire product based off of being here for 11 months now. So I'm very curious to see how he responds, but you also at the same time can't look at this and say that the results have been there right away. Like that, like there is something for Hagens to prove. I think he's a guy that should get fired right now because, you don't like the way that his receivers play. You don't like the way that he recruited or anything like that, but there is criticism there to be had. So, I think that's a situation that you got to wait and see with this 2025 class, especially. You expected maybe a little bit more in the portal. I don't think there was much in the portal in terms of receivers. Like, and I did that little drawback to 2023 yesterday, looking at the receivers they recruited last year. It ain't great, man. It ain't great. It's not the be all end all. If you're looking for a star, they're few and far between. So I'm very curious. I'm taking the wait and see approach on Hagens. The people that I talk to him really like him. The people that I that think that he can get it done. But it's going to be a wait and see because there is criticism warranted there. There's not stakes at the gate here. But it's certainly something that we're tracking.
Right.
This is an important year coming up. But when I look at those top 100 guys, I don't see a lot. I mean, Marcus Harris has come out from California. Funny because we talked California a couple times, but that's not happening. Nashawn Montgomery has those ties to Jaywan, right? Is it Jaywan? Does he have ties? Or he's not like directly. Who's Jaywan's
so
nephew? Is his nephew on the teammates with Nashawn? I'm forgetting his name.
Yes,
They came up here for a visit.
Yeah, Jaron Hughley's 2026.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I don't know if that works out to much, but Khalil Lockett came up here. He's another top 100 guy, but I just don't see a whole lot there. When you go from 150 to that 300 range, that's where you get Alex Cyrus. We'll see about Michael Thomas. There's some other guys there. Desi Jones, of course. I mean, there's quality guys in the region, but I think what fans really want is a home run, top 50 kind of receiver. And I'm not seeing a whole lot there, that's going to emerge for 2025. A lot of those guys are going to the schools that, who we discussed head coaches for earlier when it comes to the Alabama job. So we'll see. I mean, I think a lot of the same kind of receivers they've been getting are kind of the same players they're going to keep recruiting, lower 4-star, high 3-star kind of guys that need to get here and then perform like a Dotson, a Hamler, and so many others.
Yeah, guys that need time to develop, maybe not out of the box able to contribute because of their overwhelming physical talent, which I forget where we had that conversation the other day. Last question here from the mailbag. This is from Beaver Hill. He says, has the portal impacted the number of high school recruits that PSU plans to bring in each cycle? Are they maybe holding back on acceptable commitments from a scholarship guy that they would normally have taken, but instead use that spot for a portal each year of the non-priority players that are at the top of the board? Ryan, is this something you've seen?
For the most part, no. I mean, Penn State is definitely going to be more of a high school recruiting kind of team. That's how they're going to build their roster. James made that clear, I think, on signing day. I mean, he's brought that up before. They are certainly going to be focusing more on the high school ranks and develop guys. With that said, the 2024 class at one point, we were projected could have been a 28-person class potentially, and they had scholarships to go all the way to up to maybe 30 if they really just kept hitting home run after home run and, landing guys that really coveted. But of course, that's not how it got, right? 25 guys are who they signed. And I think if there wasn't a transfer portal, we probably would have seen a class maybe closer to 28 or so, and they would have taken a few more risks there. But I do get the impression they kind of maybe held, I don't want to say held some scholarships back, but, maybe de-emphasize high school a little bit towards the end of the season. Sean?
They changed the rules last year, I believe it was. So the initial counters used to be 25, and you would have to work in, and sometimes you get some leeway with that with certain numbers, and you get up to 28. So you would have to work your 25 or your 20-some high school recruits and your portal guys in there. That was the case when like Ebikade was here. You're trying to make it work with both of those numbers, cramming them under the one number. That's gone. So now you can bring in whatever you want to bring in, essentially. So takes the emphasis off there. Probably moves the high school line a little bit higher in terms of what you're willing to take, because that you can continue to fill space with portals, not necessarily just rely heavily on the portal. James Franklin said it on signing day. They're not a huge transfer portal team. Doesn't mean they don't use the portal, but like you need a development program, and we saw that this year with the defensive line retention and the way that they've been able to do that. So that will be that's kind of a different conversation, but I don't think it's impacted now. It's really impacted high school recruiting in terms of those scholarships in general. But I don't think it's affected Penn State in that sense, in that realm as much. You're fighting the 85 every year. That's all you're fighting right now. It's not about, that you can only bring in 25 guys this year. You're always fighting that 85, and the math always seems to work out. So, that's kind of where you're at with that.
I love that line. The math always works out. And you said this maybe like 6 months ago. Like, also, don't try and do the math on your own, because you'll never get there. I that's stuck in my brain, because I was like, people ask that, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, if Fitz doesn't know, I definitely know.
They won't tell me the math, and I'm not a math guy, so I'm not going to seek out math. I was told there'd be no math in this job, and that's really one reason that I got here. So
that's also why they have an Ivy League grad doing it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a common theme for all of us, by the way. No math was involved.
Very good at carrying the one. Yes.
One thing, though, including numbers, is the prolific number of articles that Ryan has written about. This guy's coming to junior day. This guy's coming to junior day. It's been chock full of exclusive Blue White Illustrated content in the recruiting thread recently. So, Ryan, final thoughts here. Anything you want to point fans to check out over at the site, or what you're thinking and writing about this week?
Yeah, just we wrote about a top 100 player this morning who confirmed his visit, and I got another one to post here as soon as we get off. So, like I said earlier, I got about 20 guys right now confirmed for these next 3 upcoming junior days. We'll sprinkle some more of them out here in the next 48 hours or so. I would think early next week sometime we'll get a little bit more of a full complete list together of all the guys we have confirmed right now. And then, of course, when we get to next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's when that January 20th list will really grow and expand, and we'll figure out who all is going to be here next week. I would think about 120 to 130, somewhere in that ballpark, are going to visit over the next 3 weeks. So enjoy the somewhat quiet weekend, I believe it will be, because it's about to get a little more hectic.
Yeah,
I guess I'm talking myself on that one. I don't even know why I said
something's going to happen, Ryan. Don't jinx yourself. Fitz, same thing. Final thoughts, what you want to get out of here with?
Not much. We've covered a lot in this episode. I appreciate you guys checking us out. I appreciate if you like the video as well. Helps us out, helps us get up in the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Still working on the portal. They're not done there, but it's getting to the point where it's going to shut. That door is going to slam shut. There's very few finite dates in college football recruiting, all this portal stuff, but your late registration is midnight on Sunday. So Penn State's still going to work on that. We're going to get into 25 junior days. Ryan's been crushing it so far. But really, just check out our stuff. Check out our stuff. Subscribe to our platform. Subscribe to our website. It's really, it's going to get you where you want to be in terms of your offseason fix. So check us out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
We've got a bunch of film rooms coming up. We've been holding a bunch of things back, so I'll have a couple of those about AJ Harris. Of course, we got more AJ Harris conversation coming up here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel as well. Appreciate Fitz with the like and subscribe. I love that I didn't have to do that today. That is awesome. We'll be back with more Penn State football conversation when breaking news happens, and of course, next week with our live shows. We'll talk to you then.